batch 628, which is another batch of the pears from the controlled atmosphere storage or modified atmosphere storage, is just about done, ready for the dry check, that is. It's been going for about 41 hours, and it's a little over 11.1 pounds, 5,050 grams. We'll get them out and check them, then put them back in for the weight check. With my older software, it turns the heaters off 15 minutes before it finishes. So the heaters have been off for 11 minutes now. The pears have started to cool down, but they're still plenty warm and there's no danger for condensation. For some of the sweeter types of foods like ripe pears, I do like to let them cool a little bit so they're not quite as warm because of, I guess because of all the sugars, and with these pears, the lack of structure, they tend to still be flexible until they cool, no matter how dry they are. They're just sugary and there's no shell structure left almost. They're like pear flavored cotton candy. So let's get them out. So we'll use the down arrow and go past the rest of the time. Get the drain valve open. Then as soon as the pressures have equalized, we can open the door. Until the pressures are equalized, you're not going to get that door open because it's being pushed by over 1,000, maybe 1,500 pounds of air pressure pushing in. Okay, so tray 1. And it's still slightly warm to the touch, so that's good. So 995, tray 2. And this one's noticeably warmer, 968. And then we'll be switching the location of those. So tray 2 is going to go up a spot, and tray 1 is going to come down a spot. And then tray 3, 955, and tray 4. And this is the one that was on the bottom, and it's noticeably cooler, 983. So I'm going to put tray 3 up a spot, or tray 4 up a spot, and tray 3 will come down a spot. Put the front back in place, and this disc really doesn't have a lot of use or value at this point in the process. Its main use is for when I'm first starting the cycle and starting up the machine, and it's sitting for 6 or 8 hours doing the freeze portion of it, but it's not under vacuum. Once it's under vacuum, it really doesn't matter because it acts as another insulation layer. Well, when it's vacuum, it doesn't matter because there's no air in there to transmit the heat through out to here. So it's really useful when I'm first starting, or also after it ends and it's sitting for 10 hours, 15 hours, some air does leak in there. It seems to help then. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter. So let's get it restarted. So I'll give it 2 more hours, so I'll press more dry time, close the drain valve. Okay, the drain valve is closed, continue, and with my older firmware, it'll tell me that the pump is cooling and that it'll restart in an hour. I'm just going to hit the clock to jump past that because I've got the fan blowing on it, so I'm not worried about that at all. Okay, and I'll give it an extra 15 so that it'll have 2 hours of actual freeze dry time. So we'll be back in 2 hours and check it. So don't go away, it'll be just a second. All right, I'm back. It's a little over 2 hours and the heaters are already off, so it started to cool. We'll get them out and check them. Hopefully they're already done, or to be more precise of a way to think about it, hopefully they didn't lose any weight, which means they were done 2 hours ago. So we'll bypass the last of that. We'll open the drain valve, and as soon as the pressure is equalized, we can get the door open. And tray 1, and it's still nice and warm. Tray 2, tray 3. Okay, so those had no change. Oops, make sure that it's not touching, because that'll mess it up, of course. And there's no change on that one. We're going to go ahead and take them out. Going to go no defrost on the machine. Oh, I hit the wrong button. I meant to hit no defrost and I hit more dry time. So I meant to hit no defrost and I put more dry time. In order to get it so that it's not going to start pulling a vacuum, I turned off the vacuum pump. Now I can just press this and then cancel. Come on, cancel. And then no defrost. But that way I don't have to worry about the vacuum pump coming on and it starts sucking air through that. We'll get these moved over to the bagging area and come back and get the times and power usage. The time on the machine is showing 43.5 hours, but we know that it was done 2 hours ago because we just gave it 2 more hours and it didn't lose weight. So we can back that up to 41.5 hours. So that's the time I'll use for the how long did it take portion. So 41.5 hours. And the power usage on that batch was 33.53 kilowatt hours. We'll reset it and have it ready for the next one. And this meter, you can set it up to show the cost by inputting the cost of your electricity where you're at. I don't do that because I just want to show the kilowatt hours, because then you can figure out what it would cost in your area, because the power costs vary wildly across even a state, let alone a country or between different countries. And the 3.5 watts is what the electronics of the harvest right is using on my machine while it's not running. We'll get the defrost baffle in place. Oh, I want to check, because it's a big load, I want to see how much ice is on the bottom. There's so much ice underneath. I don't know if I can show that. I'll try to show that. There's so much ice underneath right now that if I start to defrost, it's going to build up a little lake here and come pouring out the front a bit. So I'm going to use my little aluminum pieces in here, and I can melt a groove at the top of the ice, so then it'll melt down and then make a channel through the back. And of course, if you were closing the door and defrosting, then that's not going to be a problem anyway, because it will seal here and it'll come up the door a bit, but then it'll drain back. I don't use the defrost function because I don't like to use that. I don't like to use the tray heaters just to warm that up when I can just blow warm air in there from this room, which helps cool the room and melts the ice. So we'll get that going. Let's see if we can see under there real quick. Okay, so you can see the ice in there and how tall it is. It won't even allow this to go through, which means it would be about a ½ inch deep coming out the front. But I can just take this because the aluminum will melt that ice pretty quickly, and you can see where it hits, about a ½ inch. It needs about a ½ inch more space. So I can melt this right through there, and I'll be able to get a channel melted through there. And this only happens if I use a really big batch. This was 11.14 pounds. If I stick with a regular size batch, it really doesn't happen. This is the only time I've seen this in the last year or two is the last few batches of pears. Pears have a lot of water, and I'm doing 11 pounds at a time. I'll get that melted through there real quick, and that won't take too much. And in the meantime, I'll get my defrost baffle and defrost fan in place. And I'm using a paper towel on here so I don't scratch the door. You could use a cloth or something. And again, this is only one possible way to defrost. You can use the defrost function. I tried it once or twice. I don't care for it, in part because if I close the door and use the defrost function, I'm making a warm, moist environment, which is perfect for mold and mildew. And that's not going to be a problem if you're right on top of it, come right back to it as soon as it's defrosted, open the door, and then put some kind of fan in there to dry it out, or restart it right away for the next batch. Otherwise, even if you just open the door, you're still going to have moist, warm areas between every joint of the rack, between the layers of insulation of the corrugated plastic that are on the rack. You're going to have areas that are going to be conducive to molds and mildews, in my opinion. I don't do that. If we're not running it, the door is open and the fan's running for at least 2 to 3 days before we even turn off the fan, to make sure that it's bone dry in there and that there's no chance for any kind of moisture related problems in there. But there are other ways to accomplish it. We'll get the final weights without the thermometers and find out and do the calculations, find out how much it weighs now. There we go. This batch of pears was slightly riper than this previous batch. It had been ripening for another week. And it kind of shows. The previous batch weighed 81.6 grams per pound after it was dried. This only weighs 87.99, so essentially 89 grams. So about 1.5 grams less per pound. So my plan is to bag these in 1 pound bags, just like last time. So before I finish labeling these for being 1 pound and the amount of water, I'll test it to make sure 1 pound fits in this bag. It should. These are essentially the same as the last batch, but we'll double check it. So I've got my bags pre-labeled with the batch number in case I lose this label. And then I've got the information on the label, the batch number here, what it is, the fact that it was Comice Pear slices, and that these came from a modified atmosphere storage that used Hazel 100 in it. It was put into the freeze dryer June 9th, yep, and came out the 11th, and the amount before freeze drying, and I'll put 1 pound assuming that fits. And all of this is for lot tracing. In case something later I find out about this batch that I want to retrieve all the bags or do something with them differently, I'll be able to find every bag by using this information. In our computer database, we list it by batch number and then which bag it is and what location it's gone into for our storage bins. So then we can find everything. Let's get this teared out, and then so I need 79 grams of the pears now. Sugary things often stick together. Okay. So ripe pears are not like apples. When you have apples and they're freeze dried, they almost all of them, unless again you get overripe apples that are kind of mushy, ripe apples will usually be very snappy. These will kind of snap, but the structure is completely different. You can see how it just snaps into 2 very flat pieces. It takes very little effort, and you can kind of crush these. They're more like a styrofoam because of all the sugars and things and lack of structure of the pear. So they will not be as crisp as apples unless you have underripe pears. So that fit very well. I'm going to go ahead and label the rest of these bags the same way. And it's true about all freeze-dried foods that you want to bag them quickly. But it's especially true for sugary things. Sugary things will really pull the moisture out of the air quickly. Yeehaw! And then anything extra is mine to snack. Okay, next we'll add the oxygen absorbers, and I'm using the 300cc oxygen absorbers. If you remember, this is the one I opened last time that I needed 1 out of, and the oxygen indicator. And you compare that to one that hasn't been opened, and then here's one that's out of the bag. See, it goes back to the color after the oxygen is reabsorbed. And it's such a small amount in here spread amongst the 9 of them that I'm not worried about that. But I don't like to open them more than the first time, and then I don't really like to reseal them more than once. So I'll use this one first before I use another full one. You can see how that turns dark very quickly. And we'll tuck these down the sides. And then I need 2 more. I'll go ahead and close these first before I get the next ones. And because they're pretty full, I'm just pulling on the 2 ends to pull apart the zipper area to kind of close it, and then pinch along toward the middle. You certainly could vacuum seal these. It might crush them a bit, but it probably won't hurt them. And because of the sugariness of the pears, if you vacuum, they might actually stick together. Even with this, they might end up sticking together because they are slightly sugary on the outsides. So as the oxygen is absorbed out of these will shrink down by 21% approximately, and they'll get squished a bit, and you might end up with stuck pears. And we'll get these heat sealed. And the first bag, I'm going to do it twice to make sure that my machine is all the way up to temperature at the seal area. Oh, I got that one a little short. I get too much of an angle. I didn't get 100% of that seal area, so I'll put it back in, push it up just a little. I'm trying to get it high up on the bag as I can, but I do want the full seal. Okay, wait a couple of seconds for it to cool. Okay, so I want it as high on the bag as I can get it so that I can cut it off and have room to reseal it a couple more times if I want to open it and use part of it. Or if I've got a bad seal, then I've got room to do it 2 or 3 more times before I get down to the zipper area. And as always, I'm going to add a gross weight on each bag. 104 grams. And that tells me that this bag weighs 104 grams right now. And if I've done a bad job of sealing, or if it gets a puncture when I'm moving it or carrying it or bringing it places, or if it's simply a bad bag, a bad batch of bags, moisture will get through there, it'll start to become heavier, and I can find out by weighing it. So we'll get all of these weighed and marked, and then we'll get them into the storage. Okay, if it's going up and down between 2 numbers, I'll take the higher number, because I know that means it's right on the verge of that higher number. And you certainly could use a more sensitive scale for this. Those are ready for the storage bin and the shelves, and I still haven't put the previous batch away, so we can put those all in at once. So that's a total of the last 2 batches, 22 pounds in 22 bags. The next batch of pears is only going to be 10 pounds because I pre-froze them in the little square pans. The next batch freeze drying is going to be strawberries. It was supposed to be the pears, but number 1 child has made a request for strawberries. They were on sale, so we're doing another batch of strawberries for number 1 child. So stay tuned for that after we get these on the rack. So both of these batches are ready to go into bins. Technically, this batch was ready a week ago, but I left it sitting there because I didn't know where I was going to put it yet, and it wasn't in the way. Hopefully you can see how much those have already shrunk down, and these have already started to go down quite a bit also. So this is the one I'd opened and used a couple out of just a little while ago. It was about an hour ago. Here's what they look like. This is what the indicator looks like after it's been exposed to oxygen. And you saw that on this one, and now it's almost back to the original, so about an hour. So these are all going to go into bin 41. Our original rack was set up with 2 layers deep, so I had 1 through 20 front and then 1 through 20 back, so the front level and then the back row. Well, those are filled, and we don't even have space for the 3 of the ones from our 50 batch series. And so we've expanded to another set of racks that's can't be, it's not another layer back, so we can't go like 3rd layer back or something. It's on a different shelves. And we'd wanted to relabel the bins just starting with 1 and going sequential numbers. So this one will be bin 41, and we'll relabel the rack ones 1 through 40 after a little while. And it's real easy to do because the way we have them labeled in the computer, we can just take all the ones that are bin 20 back, and that will be bin 40. And then just relabel the bin number 40. So won't make any change on where things are, and it won't make any difference to find them because of the way we have them. Okay, so we'll get these in here and get them on the shelf. And I'll go ahead and put this newer batch on the bottom.
Taxi!
So we'll get this back on the shelf, and we'll get on to the next batch as soon as the freeze dryer is defrosted, which should be in another couple of hours, and it'll be strawberries this time. It was supposed to be one more batch of the pears. They're already pre-frozen, but we had the request for a batch of strawberries from number 1 child. So that's where those are going next.